A molecule is a substance that is formed when two or more atoms combine together. It can be two atoms of the same element or two atoms of different elements. It can also be two or more atoms of different elements combining together to form a single substance called molecules. What then is a molecule? A molecule is simply a substance or the smallest particle of a substance, either an element or a compound that can take part in a chemical reaction or that can exist alone and still retain the chemical properties of that substance. How then is a molecule formed? A molecule can be formed when atoms of a particular element combine together. Let's take a look at an example of how atoms of a particular element can combine together to form a molecule of that element. Just as we have in our screen here, where we have an element, hydrogen. A molecule of hydrogen is formed when two atoms of hydrogen combine together. It will definitely form a molecule of a single element called hydrogen molecule. So we have an atom of hydrogen combining with another atom of hydrogen. It will form a molecule of hydrogen. We can also have other examples of molecules as oxygen atom combined with another oxygen atom to give you a molecule of oxygen. We can also have elements like nitrogen combining to form a molecule of nitrogen. We also have chlorine combining to form a molecule of chlorine. Also, we can have three atoms of oxygen, a particular element, combining to form a molecule of oxygen called ozone. In this case, we have three atoms of the same element combining to form a molecule of the same element. So we can have oxygen plus oxygen plus oxygen to form what is called a molecule of oxygen, which is written as O3, and it is called ozone. Now, molecules can also be formed when atoms of different elements combine together to form a molecule of a compound. This time around, it has to do with what? Different elements or atoms of different elements coming together to form a single compound or to form a molecule of a compound. Just as we have in the case of water molecules, where two atoms of hydrogen combine with one atom of oxygen to form a molecule of water. Now let's take a look at what we have here. The two atoms of hydrogen and one atom of oxygen, when they are brought together, they have chemical reaction which produces a compound called water. So this can be shown using this simple illustration as we have here, where we can have the oxygen atom moving towards the two hydrogen atoms to form a molecule of water. So what is formed here is simply what is called a compound. So when two atoms of hydrogen combine with one atom of oxygen, it forms a molecule of a compound. We can also have other cases where a molecule of a compound can be formed from different atoms, just as we have in the case of element like sodium combining with element like chlorine to form a molecule of a compound called sodium chloride. We can also have potassium combining with element like bromine to form a molecule of potassium bromide. Okay, we can also have other molecules like a molecule of calcium trioxocarbonate 4, where we have elements like calcium, carbon, and oxygen combining together to give us a molecule of a compound. Of course, these are examples of smaller molecules. We also have other larger molecules like starch or carbohydrate, where the number of atoms are very large. Now, there is a simple term called atomicity. What is atomicity? Atomicity simply means the number of atoms present in the molecule of an element or in the molecule of a substance. That is what we call atomicity. So we can have a look at some elements and their atomicity. In the case of the hydrogen molecule that we highlighted earlier, a hydrogen molecule has two atoms of hydrogen combining together to give you a molecule of the element. So in that case, we can say the atomicity of that molecule is 2. Hence, it can be called a diatomic molecule. So hydrogen is a common example of a diatomic molecule, with di in science signifying the number 2. We also have other examples where atoms can combine and form molecules that may not be what? 2 atoms. Example is when we have atoms of oxygen, 3 atoms of oxygen combining to form a molecule of oxygen consisting of 3 atoms. This time around, it is called a triatomic molecule. So oxygen can exist as a diatomic molecule in oxygen gas and can also exist as a triatomic molecule in ozone. Of course, both of them don't have the same number of atoms. Also have other bigger molecules like molecules of sulfur, where we have with the sulfur existing as sulfur with 8, the molecule having 8 atoms. So in this case, we call it a polyatomic molecule. So an example of a polyatomic molecule is sulfur. Also have polyatomic molecule like phosphorus, having 4 atoms in a molecule of the substance. So we have other substances or other elements that have 1 atom in their molecule. In that case, we call them monoatomic molecule. Mono simply indicating the number 1 in science. So we have atoms like argon, which is simply a monoatomic element. Also have atoms like neon, is also monoatomic. So all these are examples of molecules. So with that, we've come to the end of this class. Join us in our next class where we'll be taking a look at another concept called ions.